Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Two Peas on a Pod. Now this is the first released post Blue Frog under the auspices of Mark Phillips Fundraising Associates. Now if you'd like to see what I'm up to, take a look at my new website, which is markphillips.org.uk. But other than that, things are just as you would expect. Giles and I are joined this time by Alan Clayton from Revolutionise to explore his latest research into what makes a truly great fundraising organisation. Now, we touched on this in a previous episode, but this time we're diving much deeper into a critical barrier he's identified, and this is the fear of criticism. Alan also shares what can break through that fear, and it's great leadership, but not just any leadership, but level 5 leadership. And today you'll hear about the different levels of leadership and what a charity needs to do to become a truly great fundraising organisation. What follows now are a few highlights, and then I'll hand over to Giles to get us started. It's a great episode today. I hope you enjoy it.
The job of the level 5 leader is not to make people happy. The job of the level 5 leader is to fulfill the organisation's purpose. It's to stop cruelty to children. It's to cure cancer. The biggest driver of the increase of fear is actually remote working. If you're scared of criticism and you're together in a group, you can cope with it. If you're scared of criticism and you're sitting on your own feeling a bit anxious, you're going to get absolutely terrified. Okay, well, there's only three decisions that a board, a chief executive, or a leadership team need to make in order to drive fundraising growth. Most of the organizations where we start our engagement and they have this problem, what we find is the services department demands massive amounts of respect for the service user and the beneficiary and their work and gives none at all back to fundraising. Mm. It's not just going out and ask for money. There's science, there's knowledge, there's decades of learning and experience behind the art of making donors' lives better by giving them the opportunity to solve a problem that's important to them. They get sick and tired of this battle about communications between services and fundraising to the point where they don't want to deal with it anymore. Mm-hmm. So they appoint someone else to deal with it, and they call them the brand manager or the comms team, mm-hmm. and they dump them in between services and fundraising and say your job is to get those two to agree and do integrated communications. If you are the communications manager with that brief, you can't win. The comms department say, without just being yelled at all the time, is to say brand rules everything and therefore brand is boss. And the reason that kills fundraising is that brand doesn't drive fundraising growth, purpose is. So we talk about two types of organization: purpose is boss or brand is boss. And that's when it all goes wrong, when the brand becomes more important than the purpose.
Okay, thank you, Mark. And as Mark has said, we have back in the hot seat Alan Clayton. You'll have seen Alan Clayton's piece with us, and it was one of the most popular. But you also touched on something that I thought was really worth probing and doing a deep dive into, to really get into the detail. Because you said there is no doubt that the single biggest block to fundraising growth is fear of criticism. Yep. And that really got to me. And you then said that the work that Adrian Sargeant did showed that the biggest solution to that is actually level 5 leadership.
Absolutely.
I think Mark is now going to read exactly what level 5 leadership is, and then we're going to hand over to Alan. So, Mark, what is level 5 leadership?
Well, I'm sure that Alan's probably going to define this, but just so we know, there are 5 levels of leadership, and I will detail them all in the supporting copy, so you can have a quick look at that. But level 5 leadership is the pinnacle of leadership, built on respect. People follow you because of who you are and what you represent. It's the highest level of leadership. It's earned over time, and it's reserved for those who have consistently demonstrated integrity, excellence, and lasting impact. and it shapes culture and also inspires generations. Is that good enough?
Absolutely. That's the long definition.
Okay, over to you for the next, as long as you want.
Yeah, the short definition is tremendous will combined with personal humility. That's the short version of the definition. That's what Jim Collins picked up in From Good to Great and Adrian Sargeant reinforced. And then our follow-up research suggested that the leaders who achieve great fundraising growth actually have more will than their equivalents in sales or marketing in the private sector, which was an absolute surprise to me. So it manifests as a kind of toughness, but it's not the toughness in that you're, a ruthless, table-banging person, as you sort of the stereotype from financial services or something would be. You can drill into where the toughness comes from, and it's because the purpose is the most important thing in their lives. What we're trying to achieve for goodness in the world is the guide for everything else, and they sort of get the sort of iron fist in the velvet glove from their profound belief in the purpose of the organisation. That's the tremendous will part of it, and when you see it in the leaders that have successfully increased their fundraising by 2, 3, 4, 5, 100, 1,000%, you can see this in them. This absolute drive to succeed, and succeed doesn't just mean increasing fundraising. It doesn't just mean meeting the annual budget. It means making genuine progress towards solving the problem. The shortcut that we give to it is to actually depersonalize level 5 leadership and say fundraising grows when purpose is boss. That the boss of your organization is your purpose, and that guides all decisions, and that stops compromise, it stops mission creep, it stops procrastination, and gets people moving, and the income grows. Simple as that. Simple is not the same as easy.
Well, it's simple to say, but tell how do we do it?
It's really, really, really hard to do. Exceptionally hard to do. A very small number of people are born with the ability to be level 5 leaders. The vast majority develop it over a long period of time. And to challenge the three in the room, I rather suspect Mark and I have developed it over time, where Giles rather had it from the 1970s onwards. But you work hard. And you get there because your ego needs to be seen reduce over your life, and your need to achieve something important or useful increases. So you tend to it over time, but ultimately it's about resilience and self-confidence. And the way you build resilience and self-confidence is have a very clear aim for where you're going. I want to achieve this purpose. Yep. And then you've just got to keep going regardless of all the setbacks on the way. And just keep going and pick yourself up and keep going and find a different way to do it, find a better way to do it. Don't obsess with planning, keep the momentum up, keep it moving. And don't let the fears of mistakes or errors, or most importantly of all, criticism, stop you. And that's the direct link back to what excited you so much in the previous podcast, Giles, was that the fear of criticism has now become the most difficult thing a leader has to deal with in a charity, and also the greatest block to fundraising growth.
So that's great. So you now talked a bit about level 5 leadership.
Yeah.
But can we go back to? There is no doubt that the single biggest block to fundraising growth is fear of criticism, because I don't believe that most viewers of this podcast will understand that, accept it, say, oh yes, that's a light bulb moment. Can you give us the light bulb moment? Why do you believe that? There is no doubt, you said.
Okay, well, there's only three decisions that a board, a chief executive, or a leadership team need to make in order to drive fundraising growth. One is to have powerful, clear messaging that communicates the problem, solution, ambition, to have a good product to sell to donors, if you like. But it's got to be unique to the organization, it's got to be powerful, it's got to be clear, and it's got to be emotional. Yeah, that they make that decision without compromise. 2 is the internal culture. Fundraising needs to move fast. It needs to behave like a private sector organisation inside the charity culture. You know, it's a time in, time out machine. The faster and more efficiently it moves, the more money it makes. And to do that, it needs to be liberated from the bureaucracy that is necessary in the rest of the charity. You know, if you're safeguarding children, Giles, you need a bureaucracy in the NSPCC, but the fundraising team doesn't need it to the same extent that children's protection services do. So liberated from that bureaucracy, and liberated from the cynical criticism of colleagues in other departments that quite simply don't like fundraising or think or don't understand it or think it should be done a different way. So the way we summarize that is you decide that you're going to be as good at meeting the needs of your donors as you are at meeting the needs of your beneficiaries or service users. And the third one is fundraising is a multi-year game. You need to liberate fundraising from the quarterly results or the annual results, and you have to look at the proper ROI, and the leaders need to think like investors. Multi-year, 3, 5, 7, 10 years to drive growth, because fundraising requires investment. 83% of fundraising growth is driven by how much you spend on it. 17% is the other variables. So without the investment, you get nowhere. So there's 3 decisions that need to be made. Powerful, focused messaging, organizational pride in being good at fundraising, and the liberation that comes with that. And third is the optimized investment. All 3 of these are open to criticism. Yep. So 1, on the messaging, everybody in the world's got an opinion, and the vast majority of people say we need to use positive images, we need to tell them the complexity of what we are, how good our organisation is, then people will give money to our organisation. Yep. And if we start to talk in any way that's emotional or about the problem, we get criticised, either externally or more commonly inside the organisation, even though you need to be emotional and sell the problem to raise money. You absolutely have to do it. Second, the internal culture aspect. Let's be blunt. There are lots and lots of people in services or programs departments that quite simply don't like fundraising because it involves money, and they don't think we should need money in order to make the world a better place. And they just don't like fundraising or money people or people who wear suit jackets and raise money. They just don't like them. So they will criticize everything they do. Second, there are finance people that like to have all the power in their department, so they seek to make fundraising subsidiary to them. I've seen all of these things happen. So the fundraiser risks being criticized just for being a fundraiser. Yeah. Let me finish this, you come back to that. And the third one is the money. The greatest problem here is we account retrospectively by the year, but we plan forward by the decade. So the people that are criticizing fund ratios are looking at the completely wrong measure. They're looking at a retrospective annual measure rather than a forward-looking decade measure. And they start publishing these on websites, which is why you now get, these ridiculous criticisms of fundraising performance, whereas it's still by far the most profitable business I've ever seen. So they're the 3 sources of criticism, and they come from either bias or ignorance.
Okay, I think people watching this will understand all of that. What I still haven't quite got is can you focus on this fear of criticism?
Yep, absolutely.
So who is doing the criticizing?
Yep.
And what are they criticizing? And why is this the block to fundraising growth?
Okay.
Who's doing it? What are they criticizing? Why is it the biggest block?
Okay. Because it is so much easier for people to criticize in public now than it ever has been through the whole of history. Yep. That's the growing tide. It's also why the mental health of the population is on the decline, is because anybody now can self-publish their opinion, gather a group of like-minded people about them, and then present their opinion as fact. So perhaps the examples are a group of people within a charity forming a WhatsApp group or a social media group in order to attack the leadership, and then they do so publicly. There's been a number of instances on this, some of them absolutely merited, many of them absolutely not. It's the online media being able to react very, 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 very quickly. And there's also a bit of a backlash from certain aspects of the media who their view of life is that some of the charities and NGOs have become overtly political and therefore should be held to account as political parties would be. So the attacks coming from the media, very much so on social media response, but also internally. The different factions can now access communications in a way that they never could before. And then, of course, you know, the biggest driver of the increase of fear is actually remote working. If you're scared of criticism and you're together in a group, you can cope with it. If you're scared of criticism and you're sitting on your own feeling a bit anxious, you're going to get absolutely terrified by it. And then people in that situation, they tend to lash out. So the biggest driver is just the ability of people to openly and publicly criticize an organisation in a way they've never done before.
So what would be the difference in terms of criticism and being avoidant of conflict? Because you could be frightened of criticism, but the other problem that I see is people who are avoidant of conflict. They don't want to make decisions that's going to make other people unhappy.
Well, fundamentally, they're the same thing.
Yeah. Indeed, but
this is the nub of it. The job of the level 5 leader is not to make people happy. The job of the level 5 leader is to fulfill the organisation's purpose. It's to stop cruelty to children. It's to cure cancer. Yeah, that's their job. It's not to make people happy. And here's the crux, if you want to understand the difference between fundraising and services. And again, the academics are quite clear on this. There are two types of leadership that are successful in charities. One is servant leadership, where you meet the needs of the followers and their performance improves. So the job of the leader there is, if not to keep people happy, at least make them satisfied and have the tools to do the job and trust their intrinsic motivations. And then there's transformational leadership, which involves a relentless commitment to the vision of the organization. And it moves much, much faster. Yeah. So we take that insight from the academics, we look at the successful organizations, and actually both are necessary, because the best management style for the programs or services department is servant leadership, and the best leadership style for fundraising departments is transformational leadership. If you lead part of your organization transformationally, then the people who like servant leadership are not going to like it. Yep. So you're going to get criticized just for that particular leadership style, even if it only applies to the fundraising team. So you have this grinding conflict between, I think I referenced it in the last podcast, the two businesses, one mission. It's that grinding conflict, and there's a huge risk of criticism between the two.
And within that framework, then let's stick at that point about criticism and conflict, because as I see a lot of the problems that charities that I work with face is it is about avoiding conflict rather than criticism. Some both. I've worked with people who've really struggled with those areas. Yeah. Is it time to ask the question, how do you overcome that? How do you get to the point where what is the support? What is the advice? How do you give someone the strength to do that? Or is it simply, you're in the wrong job, we need someone else?
Are you asking basically the question, how does a level 5 leader look? What do they look like?
Well, no, it's
notice how do we do it?
No, it's looking at revolutionising it in a way and saying that you're brought into an organisation. It doesn't matter which particular level, and you know what your goal is going to be. I need someone in charge who's actually going to run with this problem and solve it. Can you help someone do that, or is it simply you're going to need a different personality?
But Barry, so you said, how do we do it? So who's the we, and what's the it, and how does that relate to level 5 leadership?
Yeah.
To somebody watching this who thinks they're a level 5 leadership or aspires to be level 5 leadership, what is the how do we do it in practice?
Yep. Okay. I'll take those points in order. Fear of conflict is just if someone criticises you and you don't respond because you're scared of the conflict, then what happens is you basically you lose ground. You lose authority to stand your point. So being conflict averse is not great. Assertiveness is required in that scenario. I'll unpick the layers of your major point about how on earth do we solve this. So first of all, it's the classic definition of a team. Same goal, the purpose of the organisation. So number one, that's got to be defined in a way that works for services and for fundraising. Yeah. At the moment, 9 times out of 10, it's defined in a way that works for services and not for fundraising. Yeah. So what's the purpose of the organisation? So if you look at NSPCC, at the moment, it's got a purpose at the moment, which is not very exciting. It's not very emotional, and it doesn't tell you what the problem is. And their fundraising is not growing, whereas for a while it was cruelty to children must stop, which worked for both fundraising and services, and it defined the problem and it was succinct. Fundraising was growing. I don't believe those words drive the growth, but they're symptomatic of the culture that does. Yeah. So number one, have a common goal for the two teams with different skills, but it's got to work for both. And then second is simply understanding and mutual professional respect, that they are different roles. Most of the organizations where we start our engagement and they have this problem, what we find is the services department demands massive amounts of respect for the service user and the beneficiary and their work, and gives none at all back to fundraising. Yeah. So they've got to realise that respect. And I like to make give the analogy of, say, a firm of sophisticated engineers, where you might have 100 engineers, all who've got 3 degrees, half of them have got a PhD, they've got letters after their name, that means they have to extend the business card. And then you've got a sales and marketing team who have maybe got 1 letter after their name or none at all. Yet the sales and marketing team get paid more than the engineers do. Well, that's because the engineers are technocrats, and there's a lot of them. The universities send out a lot of engineers, so the market has plenty to pick from. People who can sell are few and far between, because the vast majority of people don't want to, and out of those that want to, the vast majority can't. So if you take the analogy of fundraising by the sales and marketing department, they're doing the job that nobody else wants to do. Very few people relish going out and selling something, asking for money. And because it's seen as a bit dirty, a bit sort of white sock and black shoes from the 1980s, I've got black socks on, I'm good, from the 1980s, it's just looked down on as being a bit cheap and not professional. But the reality is that nothing happens in that engineering firm until somebody sells something. And it's the same in the charity. You don't solve any problems for children or cancer patients until we bring some money in. So it's a respect for doing the job that they don't want to do. But there is science. It's not just going out and ask for money. There's science, there's knowledge, there's decades of learning and experience behind the art of making donors' lives better by giving them the opportunity to solve a problem that's important to them.
Can I ask in a slightly different way? If we're looking at a commercial concern, you've got product and you've got the sales and marketing. I think that one of the problems we've got with charities is you've got 3 operations going. You've got the service delivery, you've got fundraising, and then you chuck comms and brand in the mix. And with comms and brand, you will have comms and brand that might actively undermine fundraising. They'll be giving direction and and instructions about how the organisation has to be portrayed. That's not necessarily agreed with by the people in service delivery, but will actively undermine the fundraising operation. And it's almost like the complexity of a charity in terms of these 3 operations. It goes off the scale.
Okay, well, I've tracked back how that happens. Would you like
to
know why that happens?
I'd pay money.
Okay.
I'd pay money.
You have 2 businesses. The services department and the fundraising department. One has to communicate the solution to get more service users. The other one has to communicate the problem to get more donors. And they argue. And fundraising gets paralysed because the junior fundraisers have nothing to argue against the criticism coming from the services department. Yep. Simple as that. You have your senior leadership who don't understand this. They've probably come up from a service department background, and they don't really understand money, growth, and fundraising. Not all of them, but there's a lot. Yep. They get sick and tired of this battle about communications between services and fundraising to the point where they don't want to deal with it anymore. So they appoint someone else to deal with it, and they call them the brand manager or the comms team, and they dump them in between services and fundraising and say, your job is to get those two to agree and do integrated communications. If you are the communications manager with that brief, you can't win. You're stuffed. It's going to be who moans most, who carps most, is going to be dominant in that messaging. And because there's nothing that they can do, what they then do is move their department up the hierarchy to get some kind of authority. So the only way they can get these two different businesses to do what the comms departments say without just being yelled at all the time is to say brand rules everything and therefore brand is boss. And the reason that kills fundraising is that brand doesn't drive fundraising growth, purpose is. So we talk about two types of organization, purpose is boss or brand is boss. And that's when it all goes wrong, when the brand becomes more important than the purpose.
Okay, but sorry, Mark, do you want?
Can I do my
Yeah, of course.
Because I've just got one point to add on that. So how do you elevate purpose back over brand? Where brand has got crazy and is in charge.
Sometimes the chief executive does it structurally.
Okay, gotcha. I understand what that means. Yes.
Yep. And it's very effective when they do. It's extremely effective when they do.
So that's combining departments, as it were.
Yes.
Okay.
Or splitting.
Yes.
So a really good organisation at the moment has realised that they don't need this brand as boss, so they've split their comms team. So there is a services comms team and there's a fundraising comms team.
Okay, that would be interesting.
That would be
that would be interesting. Are you
It's
allowed
brilliant.
to say who that is?
I'd rather not at the moment because I don't think they've gone
Afterwards.
public with it
Okay,
yet.
that
They
would-
might have done.
That would be amazing. I'd love to hear that later on.
But
We'll
it is
talk about
one of the most successful fundraising organisations I've ever worked with.
that is great. So a brand team for services, brand team for fundraising.
Yeah, and of
Amazing.
course those two teams meet to ensure consistency, because consistency is important, even though the messages are different.
Yeah.
So they meet to ensure consistency, but they just become the best at service measuring, the best at fundraising messaging. There's a second way,
Carry on.
which is to understand that purpose is a shared emotional space. And we have found that if you could get people back into that raw emotional space of what problem are we trying to solve, why was our organisation founded, talk about service users and not the bloody organisation, yeah, that you can break through this sort of obsession of control that is driving the wrong kind of brand thinking.
Yeah.
Branding is good if it's done well.
Yeah.
But so often the brand is driven just by the services department with no thought for fundraising. You can get back into that shared emotional space, because that's the one thing that the fundraisers and the services departments have in common is deep down they really want to do something useful. They really care. And if you can get them back into that space. We have never seen it successfully done with a brand pyramid or a SWOT analysis or a pest analysis. You put people in a room face to face in real life, you shortlist your options logically, and then you spin out and you get back into the emotional space, and you don't leave it until the whole room is in harmony.
Which
Okay,
was...
can I now?
Oh, go on, Giles. Carry on.
Okay. For the first
This is the Giles Pegram show, actually.
Yeah,
everyone.
brilliant.
No, I'm joking. Giles is
It's
joking. Carry
brilliant.
on.
You confused me because in the first 20 minutes you talked about a number of things, and now you suddenly introduced brand.
No, Mark introduced
That's
brand.
me.
No, but and then you picked up on it, and brand is boss. So
No, purpose is boss.
no, you said in a lot
Brand
of
likes to
in a
become
lot of
boss.
organisations,
Yeah.
brand is boss.
Yeah.
So that's what you said. So I've got here, there's no doubt the single biggest block to fundraising growth is fear of criticism.
Yep.
That's number one. Number two is that the NSPCC is essentially seen as being about children, and therefore fundraising is like pulling levers and whatever it is, and down and dirty.
Yep.
Whereas fundraising is actually the art of making donors' lives better by helping them solve a problem dear to them. And now you've got the brand is boss and seen as boss,
Yeah.
and what we should be getting back to is purpose. And can you link those for me? Because at the moment I can't link them.
The people allow brand. The reason people allow brand to become boss is because rigorous control of the brand is the best way of the organisation avoiding criticism.
Right. Say that again.
Sometimes.
Yeah, the role of the brand is perceived as the best way of the organisation avoiding criticism.
Sometimes.
Sometimes, well, no, it's perceived as.
Yeah.
It doesn't always achieve it.
Can you build on that?
But it's perceived as it. Yeah, absolutely. So, if you think that the problem is what drives fundraising growth, yeah, and what drives growth in services is credibility. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a fear that communicating the problem through fundraising will reduce the credibility of the organisation to recruit new staff, influence government, and to reach new service users. Yep. So the reason brand gets so powerful is its job is to protect credibility, and to protect credibility, we talk about the organisations and its services, and the role of the problem is diminished or reduced to zero. So it's about fear of criticism.
Okay. Can I have one more question, and then I will shut up.
Oh, you can ask as many as you like. It was a joke.
So, brand avoids criticism. Therefore, the power goes to the brand.
That's not what a brand is for.
No.
But that's why the power goes to the brand.
Right. So the
You're
power
right.
goes to the brand because that helps the organisation avoid criticism. Fundraising is not seen as the art of helping donors change the world. It's seen as the dirty pulling levers, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So, what is it about a level 5 leader that changes that? What do our viewers who are fundraisers and are thinking, am I a level 5 leader? What's the question they should be asking themselves? How does a level 5 leader get across the problem of the brand avoiding criticism? How do they get the attitude to fundraising being about the art of making donors' lives better? Because that is obviously, the art of inspiring donors to make their lives better seems to be something that's so powerful, but obviously isn't got by a lot of chief executives who see fundraising as a rather dirty business of asking for money.
Yeah.
Then I finish.
It's one question. The leader, when they become director of fundraising or chief executive or even on the board, they realise they do not know how to manage two businesses, one mission. And all the successful ones start with one simple question, which is, what do I need to learn? Which, of course, is the personal humility part of being a level 5 leader. I still want to fulfill the mission. I have a new job. What do I need to learn in order to lead fundraising as well as services? Full stop.
I thought I was doing all the talking and you wanted to take over.
I'll just bring it back to
What-
brand.
what-
No,
okay.
I can come in, or
Then I'll ask another question, but then you then come in. So what do they need to learn? And learning humility is not of itself going to deal with the question of making them understanding that they're two businesses and that they fit into one business and need to learn. What do they need to learn?
Two different leadership styles. Servant leadership, which is probably the leadership style they have if they've come up through services, although not always. Some have come from the private sector.
Hang on, you're talking about CEOs now, of fundraisers.
CEOs or directors. Let's just think of the C-suite.
Okay.
Yeah, as an entity, because it differs and the personalities differ between organisations. So it's two leadership styles: transformational leadership for fundraising and servant leadership for the rest of the organisation. And critically, how to do both and get them to work constructively together rather than tearing each other apart. So it's a real skill set. So some of that starts with what works in fundraising and what works in services, and that goes into the three categories: culture, investment, and communications. And they educate themselves on the differences and the strengths of the two different businesses, and then they learn or figure out what is their constant diligence in making sure the two businesses work constructively rather than destructively.
But you're talking now generally about C-suite executives.
C-suite objectives, yeah.
Now let's talk about fundraising directors,
Yeah.
who are the people who've got to get over these obstacles that you've just described. What do they have to learn?
Well, I know what they do.
Tell us what they do.
Because
and
they
then tell us
drink
what
a
they need to do
surprisingly
differently.
large amount of coffee and eat a surprisingly large number of lunches. Because what they've learned is that time spent speaking to their colleagues from other departments is priceless. If the two departments are communicating with each other by email or memo or at the water cooler, it's not so good. So they actually real life conversations with their counterparts in other departments.
Getting back into the office.
Getting back into the office.
Yeah.
Well, it's I reference this in the book about great fundraising, actually. They perceive their job as being part of their job as to lead the fundraising department, but part of their job is to get the best out of the rest of the organization on behalf of the donor. And they become the internal advocate for donors of all kind within the organization. So, if a donor wants information tomorrow and everyone else says we're too busy, then they sort that and say, if you want £500,000, you've got to get the information tomorrow. And it doesn't matter if you believe that's right or wrong, it's got to be done. Or if there's someone wants to fund something in particular, they don't let policy or busyness or whatever get in the way. They demand the best on behalf of their donor, and they do that with a mix of being demanding, of being charming, of education, etc., etc. So that's the best summary. The great fundraising leader will have become director because they know how to raise money. The thing they now have to do is get the best out of the rest of the organisation on behalf of the donor. So that's the most difficult thing to learn when you become a director of fundraising.
Funnily enough, it isn't the most difficult thing to learn. It's the easiest thing in the world. And I'm glad you mentioned it, because I'm looking back to my time as director of fundraising at the NSPCC. My most important relationship was with my chief executive.
Yeah.
I had to convince I had to inspire my chief executive to think that I knew what I was doing. The next three most important relationships I had were with the director of services, the director of finances, and the director of HR, because I needed to understand where they were, where their thinking was, how I could contribute to it, and how they could see me as an equal partner. Ditto the head of finance. I need to get on side because of investment. Ditto HR. And once you've decided that those are the key relationships, it isn't actually that difficult to book a meeting, go for coffee, have a lunch or whatever. And I don't know why you have to aspire to get to level 5 leadership before you can have a relationship with your finance director.
Giles, the reason you don't understand it is because you've been a level 5 leader since the 70s.
No, flattery, this is not...
It might sound flattering, and you're always embarrassed when I compliment you, and have been for 2 decades, but it's also true. Getting to director of fundraising with the prime scale being raising money, then suddenly having this whole new demand set thrown of you, does require a different level of skill. It does require a different level of confidence, a different level of assertiveness that hasn't been planned into the average fundraiser. And if you are a bit low confidence, new in this world, and you intend a group whose first action is to criticize fundraising or tell you their view of it, you find yourself on the back foot from day one. And we've seen this happen many, many times. In your situation at the NSPCC, you were there long before the vast majority of your senior colleagues were. So you weren't walking into that, you weren't arriving at a new situation, and having been in the same job for 30 years, but the new person also is. And if you think that the fundraiser might have had a modest budget on learning how to raise more money, I know very few who have been trained in leadership along the way. I mean, a handful that we've worked with, I don't know any others. And leadership is a different skill.
There is this sense, and I agree 100%, level 5 leadership, brilliant, this person who's motivated, going to go through it. But it's not always down to criticism. You know, sometimes it's just they don't want to do it. You know, that's one of the problems that you face, that it's easier for somebody just to say, oh, we're carrying as we are. If we don't get, you know, if we don't hit our targets, we just blame the economy. Yeah. I've literally had those conversations. Yeah. Let's leave it as it is, and we carry on. We'll have no growth. You know, we just vaguely hit our targets year after year. I think Peter Wanless said this, that you know, the charities have a danger of shrinking to success, of cutting their services to match the level of income.
Yeah, absolutely. Tremendous will. It's the first half of the level 5 leadership. The purpose is more important than anything. And it's not good enough for us to just carry on because it's easier. You know, Mark, you must get this on a daily basis like I do. You know, do we have to fill this brief in like this? It would be easier for us it would be easier for us to do this. It would be easier for us to do that. It'd be easier to do this. I've had to internally revolutionize. It was a number of years ago that I don't care if something is easier for you. Your job is to be best, because everything we must do must be in the client's best interest and in the best interest of their purpose. There is nothing in our mission that says we have to make things easier for you. We do it the best way.
I've got that. But then you've almost got these two bosses, which is something that Giles and I were talking about earlier on. Yeah. You've got, you know, one boss is, you know, is the beneficiary. How do we maximise our income from the beneficiary? We maximise that by treating the donors in these ways. Yeah. But then you'll have another boss, which could be a very senior person who's just come to a job, who literally says, well, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, you get that.
You know, I don't want to do that. We're focusing on what I want, and what I want is X, Y, and Z. Yeah. So it's coming back to one of your other points, it's a massive amount of ego that you're dealing with. And there lies your problem. That's one of the reasons we were talking about this earlier on, that I'm closing, you know, Blue Frog down, is the absolute impossibility of working in a situation like that, where you can say, this is the reasons why this will be best for your mission, for your purpose, for your benefit. So, oh yeah, but we want to do something new.
Yeah, no, if you have somebody with a big ego and not the appropriate amount of education or experience, and they have authority or control over you, you may as well move on and do something else.
That is what we're doing.
Are you talking about the CEO having the big ego?
It could be anyone.
Anybody that has control or authority over your job.
But what about your having ego? Mm-hmm. Because you talked about one of the things that the director of fundraising needs to learn is humility. Yeah. And presumably, therefore, if they need to learn humility, the concern is that at the moment they have ego, so you need to turn the ego into humility. No?
Well, you need a certain amount of ego and fear to be decent at anything.
How do you rationalise the need for ego in a fundraising director and the need for humility? How does that work?
You want ambition, don't you? You've got to have ambition.
But why humility then? If you've got ambition and ego.
Okay, it's about leadership. So this is the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic reward. Yeah. So may I use you as an example, Charles?
No, please don't.
No, it's a very, very good example. Had the privilege to know you in public and in private. You walk away from any kind of praise in the public eye. Always. It's not even that you don't like it, it makes you deeply uncomfortable. That is, you know, despite being one of the most successful fundraisers the planet's ever seen, you dislike people like me or anyone else saying that.
That's why we got on so well.
I'm not going to comment on that. However, I do know you've got a bit of an ego, Giles Pegram, because we've had some private conversations when you told me you set out in 1974 to be the best fundraiser that there ever was. You told me that once, and there was no compromise. And I remember being in a private dinner with you where someone asked you about your CBE, and she said, "Were you expecting it?" And you went, "Oh yes." Absolutely, I was. The difference is, the person whose approval your ego needs is Giles Pegram. The destructive ego is the one that constantly demands the attention of and the approval of other people, and that's called extrinsic. The command over, the power over, the worship of other people.
Behind my thinking is I want to do the very best
Yeah.
for children. I know that to do the very best for children, I need to give credit to the team.
Yep.
I need to understand that purpose is more important than me, and so is
Yep.
achievement. I need to recognise that I can't do it alone.
Yep.
I'm always learning, and I'm going to make mistakes, and I need to be open with my mistakes to my team.
Yep.
And it wasn't praise. I thought what I got was like the trust of the team. Charles, he knows what he's talking about. He's a good bloke.
The belief of the team. But again, you're natural at it. You know, if you are lacking in confidence or focus, particularly as happens to the senior fundraiser as they move up from an environment that's just raising money to a level which is being a director of an organization, if they've not been taught or learned that skill set, then they will need the constant feedback from other people. And there are people that can rise to the top of a hierarchy in any organization just through egoistic behavior. We know they shouldn't, but they do. And they can often be there. I know you can't comprehend anything but level 5 leadership, but it's easy to spot it, that it's missing and that people have ego needs. Now remember that ego needs, it's not just the sort of narcissistic, everybody look at me. Yeah, ego needs can be the need for power or control, which can be passive aggressive. You know, it's not necessarily ostentatious and loud, or it's even just self-centered thinking. So, you know, we must protect the reputation of our organization, and fundraising is a risk to our reputation. That's egocentric thinking. That's thinking everything is about you and the organization, and people should give money to our organization because we're really good at what we do. So that's not ego as in the pop star ego, but it's egocentric. It's assuming that the world revolves around us, whereas actually the world in fundraising revolves around the service user and the donor, whether that donor is an individual or the government.
So if we were looking to define that, I think would be special about Giles, and sticking to the Giles as our pinnacle of level 5 leadership that we have to discuss, is Giles was on task, and he kept his team on task. And it's that element I often find is missing. You know, that your task is to, you know, let's say loosely, to maximise the income that you can raise for the available resource, and Giles did that, you know, exceptionally well, and that and again, almost like a little bit of a therapy session for me, and I do apologise, but it's almost that is missing
Focus.
Yeah, that you'll find some organisations, and again I'm going to go to branding because rebranding has traumatised me many times in my life. Yeah. You've got organisations every 2 or 3 years rebranding, and people let them get away with it. Yeah. And it's to me that the question for me is, what the hell can I do other than walk away from that situation, which is what I've principally done, just focusing on the organisations that I can work with. But what is the process that we can follow? How is it that people who are not on task, who are egocentric, get these bloody jobs?
Mark, I left Agency Land for the same reason.
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't the only reason, but one of the main ones. The answer is, what we can do is educate the leadership of the organisation. Yeah. Yeah. If I shortcut everything, if the CEO understands it, then all will be fine. Yeah.
Or the chair of trustees,
or the chair of trustees.
Well, hang on, is it either or?
It's got to be one person.
It depends.
I would argue that if it's the chair of trustees, you've got a dysfunctional organisation, because the chair of trustees should not be the person who is the lead person within the organisation.
I don't know. What would you say about that?
Well,
we've often seen
I think it has to, unless the CEO is functioning as an effective CEO, you've got a dysfunctional organisation. So I would argue it's with the CEO.
Well, arguably we do, but we've seen many situations where the CEO has come up through services, but the chair of the board has come from the private sector. So they actually really support the CEO in that journey to learning how to drive fundraising, and they're an essential ally because they're bringing a completely different skill set to the C-suite. I've seen that a number of times.
What you're now saying is the chair of trustees can be a key ally to the CEO.
Oh, absolutely.
But the CEO, I think, the
CEO is
central.
The CEO is the make or break it for fundraising growth.
Okay.
Absolutely. We're moving along very quickly, but can I talk about because of what you've brought up? What you were talking about, Mark, is organisations losing focus on their purpose. Yep, this causes all kinds of problems. It causes organisations to set up new projects because they fancy them, rather than because they solve the problem that they want to do, to move into new areas because they're chasing grants, for example. So this morning I had a live conversation. I'm not going to name the organisation, but there was huge complexity in a strategy seminar that's concluding today. And basically they've got 100-year heritage in one local area, and the team want to go national, and they've got no credibility whatsoever to go national. So our consultant is now saying, well, you're regional, and all your identity, all your emotional attachment, all your expertise, all your differentiator is regional. If you go national, you're going to be the smallest of 20 competing organisations. So this is a classic mission creep.
And you've got a 50 grand budget to publish it,
and
publicise that.
Yeah. And at the end of today will be one of the most wonderful moments of my career. And we're speaking at Bayes Business School this evening, and 70 chief execs are coming along, which is unheard of. But so that's the secret.
Which comes down to your book, in effect.
Yeah.
You know, and one of the things that I've been complaining about, one of the reasons why I've tried to promote your book so heavily, is because I need CEOs or chair of trustees to see that is their role.
Absolutely.
To try to elevate this sense that the decisions that you make, the tough decisions that you make, lives will be better as a means to the end. And in effect, if you're not willing to make those decisions that are based on evidence, that are based on fact, maybe you should shift out of that area. My words, not yours.
But you can't delegate it.
No, and you can't delegate it. And the other side of the coin is you can't put it off. You can't kick it down the road.
No.
There's organisations that have maybe like 2 CEOs. What happens at that point where you've got 2 CEOs? The assumption always is, well, the other person can sort that out.
We've got one client who's got two CEOs who do this rather well at the moment.
Oh, okay.
So I must say, to my surprise.
Yeah.
But yes, they are actually managing extremely well.
If I can, we've spoken about 2 different brands, 2 CEOs, one CEO for fundraising, one CEO for service delivery.
Oh, you could have that.
Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? Is that madness? Should you have a separate company that is the fundraising arm?
Actually, no, I don't think you should. There are some organisations, particularly in the US, that basically exist only to raise money.
Yeah.
And their only measure of success is financial.
Yeah.
And they are not nice organisations.
Okay.
They turn into money-making machines without any sense of purpose to them. I've seen them.
I want to come back to your 60 CEOs in the room tonight.
Please.
If you've already covered it, don't tell any more, but is there anything that you haven't covered that you can tell us that you're going to be saying to them tonight? Why are you so pleased you've got 60 CEOs in a room? What are you going to say to them? What difference is that going to make?
Because we've studied it for 10 years, and there's a lot of detailed things to do to drive fundraising growth. But the starting point is organisational alignment behind the purpose. Chop out anything that's off purpose, focus your resources on solving the problem the organisation's there to solve, and then liberate fundraising and services to solve the problem in their unique and opposite ways. And really the only person that can achieve organisational alignment is the CEO. The fundraising director may do all the the hard work, but the person that's got to make that commitment is the CEO.
So how are you going to talk to the CEOs this evening to get them to go away and phone their fundraising director tomorrow morning and say, come in and see me, there are things I need to talk to you about?
I'm going to tell them there's a whole new world of opportunity. Most CEOs get to the CEO position through either, the organizational bureaucracy, finance director or HR or something, or through services department. And they've now got the top job in their trade. Yep, there's no more senior job in child protection than being chief executive of the NSPCC. Yep. So that's the pinnacle of their ambition until they discover fundraising. Because what they can now do is double or triple the amount of money they have available to spend on fulfilling that purpose if they are prepared to educate themselves on how to lead that. So it's welcome to a whole new world of opportunity and ambition for your purpose if you're just prepared to invest a small number of days in learning how to lead a fundraising department as well as a great services department.
And what would they do in that 2 to 3 days? What would be the top 3-5 things?
Inspiration, education and design. It's got an unfortunate acronym, IED. It's the same as improvised explosive device, which I run.
Leave that for a moment, given the kind of situation.
They go through 3 stages. Believe that raising a lot more money to spend on mission is possible. Second is education on how to do it, which is basically those 3 conflicts and then all the nuance and such like that goes under it. And then design we use for co-creation. We've found nothing works better than creating fundraising communications or indeed plans with representatives of other departments present and involved so that they come to understand the power of emotion, the unifying power of emotion, and they sign off on communications as they're created with an understanding of why fundraising communications need to be done. If you take someone, I was going to do a printed scamp. We've probably not seen one of those for a long time. It's all PDFs now. But show a fundraising concept to somebody, they're probably going to go, it doesn't work for me. Whereas if they're involved in the actual process of coming up with the message, you get it signed off there and then. So they're the basic techniques we use. So that first of all, they have to believe and understand it's their responsibility to raise a lot more money. Second, there's an education.
You believe in the possibility.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them don't believe it's possible.
Yep.
But,
Yep.
Okay, go on. I'm going to come back to that.
Or they're too scared to even try.
Yeah.
Second is education, which is predominantly around leadership. It's a different leadership style to drive fundraising growth than it is to drive services excellence. Yep. And then the third one is, I'll summarize it as the ability to work in the unifying emotional space. Because the fundraising transaction is an emotional relationship. And if you don't have any understanding of that, you can't get going. So it's respect for emotion is the third stage. Organizational wide respect for the emotional behavior of human beings.
Somebody yesterday asked to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I do get in touch if I could ever be of help. And she said, I'm actually putting forward creating a case for my trustees to do a full stop type appeal. And I wrote back saying, it's an odd world, isn't it, where the fundraiser has to put forward a case to raise a fantastic amount of money. But it is what has to happen. Yeah. And what it should be, if the chief executive believes it's possible, then unless they're too scared, why wouldn't they be putting a case to the fundraising director saying, how much could you raise? Yeah. Because the more you can raise, the more I can do for our beneficiaries.
Fear of criticism.
In
case we try and fail.
Comes back full circle.
It goes full circle.
Or it's not what they want to do.
Yeah.
We have to bring that. Want to do it. Yeah, we have to bring that into the mix, and you find that all the time.
What the CEO wants to do.
It might, or the head of fundraising, that they might have a peculiar interest in doing something else. They want to run a campaign that's not necessarily going to generate the money.
Yeah.
And that is the problem, as we were discussing earlier on, going in thinking that an organisation wants to optimise its fundraising potential, you're not guaranteed to lose the work, but you're going to struggle to win it.
Yeah.
You know, in effect, you've got to look at what they want to do. You know, what is the newest fashion that they want to engage with.
Yeah, there are some that don't want to do what's involved in driving fundraising growth. And the reality of that is the best you can hope for is running an organisation that's going to go along at the same size as it is now. In reality, it's probably going to atrophy a bit financially. And that's okay. If that's what the trustees and the chief executive have chosen, that's their prerogative. They run the organisation. However, if you're a fundraiser, I'd go and work somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because you're there to solve the problems of the world by spending more money on them, not just by steady as it goes in an organisation. So if you are certainly an ambitious fundraiser who wants to end their career having done something useful, you need to be selective about which organisation you go and work for. And the one you need to work for is one with level 5 leadership that is not ruled by ego and fear.
But at the risk of digression, very briefly, one of the things Mark and you have talked about often is the decreasing length of time that people are spending in one organisation.
Yeah.
So you've now got appeals directors or directors of fundraising who will stay for 18 months to 2 years, then move on to the next job. And you think, how can they inspire their organisation for transformational change in 18 months?
Okay.
What commitment to the cause have they got? What commitment to the beneficiary? Presumably, somebody who stays 18 months in a job can never be a level 5 leader.
No. And the huge numbers of people in interim posts as well. That's just managing the steady as it goes state. That's all you can hope for. Simple as that. No, you need to commit. When you look at the big numbers, it's very, very good people that stayed for a relatively long period of time. Not all as long as you, Giles, but in post for. But people ask me, what's the typical? And I say 7 years is what's required. But if you look at the organisations that have been growing their fundraising, their tenure of all levels of fundraiser is way more than the average. They keep their fundraising staff much longer.
Yeah.
We did do a deep dive on this as well in the research, and it was quite surprising. The hygiene was right in terms of the appropriate salary levels and conditions and such like. But the two biggest drivers that got people to stay there was cause connection.
Yeah.
They were really connected to the mission. And second was respect from colleagues in others' departments. It was those two things.
Yeah.
And that was the difference. So basically, not scared of criticism.
So, you've told us about what you're going to tell the CEOs this evening about how they can change and how they need to believe in the possibility, be educated, etc. So now, supposing you had 60 fundraising directors in a room and you were teaching them about how to engage with their CEOs. I'm a level 5 fundraising leader. I now want to engage with my CEO who is not a level 5 leader. What do I do?
Persist.
Persist.
Go and get skills and persist. And don't moan at them. There's nothing worse than going, we need this, we need that, we need this, we need that. Inspire them with the possible. Yeah? The CEO wants to achieve something. If you go in saying, we need this, we need that. I've been a boss for a very long time. It drives me insane. You're a fundraiser. Go in with a transaction. If you give us this, we can double our income. Don't go in and say, we need this, we need that. And you might not have direct access to your CEO, so you might have to spend quite a lot of time, building support and finding the right forum to speak to your CEO and listing the support of your director, perhaps. But inspire them with the art of the possible. I'm
glad you said that the second time, because I wrote that down and put a big, bold black thing around it. Inspire with the possible.
Yes.
Say a bit more about that. Just give me some warm syrup.
Well, we do a masterclass, which has vast amounts of data in it, vast amounts of evidence. We break it down into very simple, repeatable business models, and then we bring each of them to life with a case study, which is a story of how another charity did it. And because we're quite clever, we know which fundraising organisations are going to be in the masterclass. So we choose the case studies so that they're relevant and they inspire the people in the room. So they're different for every masterclass. And people don't come up to us afterwards and say, Alan or Colin or Kerry or Nyasha, how do we execute the identity model of donor needs? People come up to us and say, how do we do a Bourne's Vicor? How do we do a Flying Doctors? How do we do a Phoenix? How do we do an NSPCC? How do we do a Macular Society? How do we do a Chaz? The art of the possible is the stories of how other people did it.
We were doing a deep dive. Have we done the deep dive? Have we gone as deep as we need to? Is there more you want to say?
There is a whole sub-area of why we are more susceptible to fear of criticism than we have ever been. And that is due to the falling tide of well-being in the entire population. Different conversation, different time. We even set up a different business to deal with that. That is horrible and it's complex, and there's lots of things that are making it worse. It's the downside of technology. Technology's got a lot of good stuff. This is the bad side of it, but that's different time, different place as to why we are more susceptible to fear of criticism than we've ever been. But apart from that, we've deep dived it.
Yeah. What I wouldn't want anyone to do, which people are doing, is getting away with, people are poorer, they're not giving as much, etc. All of my experience, all through my career, is at times of financial crisis, the people who can afford it will give more because they know the problem is greater. And I think we should be exploiting the fact of the cost of doing crisis and really going out to our major donors.
I had someone walk out of a room on me and slam the door behind them a couple of weeks ago because I was sat in a meeting and they were saying, well, fundraising's down because of cost of living crisis, because of this and because of this. And I put a chart on the screen of organisations in the UK whose fundraising has risen. It rose all the way through COVID. It rose all the way through the cost of living crisis. And I said, what, are their donors not suffering from the cost of living as well? And this person had nothing to say, walked out in a temper and slammed the door behind them. The chair of the board then turned around and goes, well, Alan, I think you may have won that argument.
Mark, is there more you want to ask, say?
Not particularly. My position is how can we get more CEOs, more fundraisers to this wonderful position of being a level 5 leader. Because it's one of the biggest, the toughest things to overcome. Is just how things can either be disrupted, go in the wrong direction, fail because you've not got somebody in that role who is ambitious, who is on task. I wish there's a magic bullet, but there isn't. But I think it's getting people, no matter what position they're in, how tired they are, how worn out they are, to I suppose to focus on what they can achieve as a means to revitalise them in that role, because it is revitalising.
That's a question of timescales, and absolutely you need to refresh yourself regularly, which is reconnect with the mission, refocus, relaunch, and the data tells us that organisations do this to their fundraisers, the successful ones. It tells that, but it's ultimately a question of timescales. So the Institute of Fundraising has just put the word career in its purpose. A lifetime of impact, a career in fundraising. And that was very deliberate, because the way you inspire somebody new into fundraising, somebody in middle management fundraising, is you've got to get away from the non-stop pressure of quarterly targets, governance oversight, internal criticism. That's the reality of their life, and they've got to do that. But they've got to get away from that to a bigger dream for themselves, a bigger vision. What I now know, having spent a long time in this career, is that the people that reach their mid-50s or 60s and know they have done something useful with their life get a tremendous internal satisfaction from that, and are so passionate about feeling that they want to pass it on to future generations. It takes time. It takes time to get senior enough to be able to utilize level 5 leadership. It takes time to get the experience to become a level 5 leader. So I inspire people and say, think about entire careers. May I tell a story? You may choose to edit it out because of Giles's modesty.
Oh, is it
no.
about how great Giles is again?
Very much is.
Well, indeed. Welcome again. Welcome back to the Giles Pegram Show. He's here all week, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, I tell a story because people lose sight of timescales. Yeah? So I've spent the last 5 years working on a personal resilience program called Empower because I'm a very wounded individual, because of trauma, and that was because of the abuses I suffered in early childhood. Yeah? And I've been supported all the way through that journey by some wonderful people. There's a lot of understanding. People will talk about it. They know what the lifelong effects are, etc., etc. 20 years ago, I wouldn't be able to do that because nobody would admit it. Nobody would have told me it happened. It would have been swept under the carpet and the help wasn't available. Yeah? So I am a beneficiary of the change in attitudes about cruelty to children that has happened while I've been alive. Yeah? I'm also lucky enough to travel the world. And I sit with organisations in Australia that are transforming themselves because of the Royal Commission in Australia into historical abuse of children. I see the same in South Africa, Canada. I see the same all over Europe. Yeah? Everywhere we go, countries are beginning to come to terms with the fact they need to act not just on current abusive and cruelty to children, but historical. Back in the 1970s, nobody knew that adults abused children except the adults that were doing the abuse. So what changed between then and now? What happened is in one country in the world, the child abuse charity went from being a tiny niche to being a massive national player with a very loud voice. And that was unique. Children's charities are big everywhere, but not the one that's about combating abuse. It's tiny elsewhere, it's niche. But in the UK a few years ago, it was spending not short of £200 million a year on combating child abuse. That in the UK solved some problems, but certainly got the problem into the consciousness of the entire population. And based on that, it was picked up by other governments and other institutions around the world who did exactly the same. Why was the NSPCC able to spend almost 200 million on this cause where other countries it might have been 200,000? Well, that wasn't because the Brits care more about historical child abuse than anybody else. Everyone cares a lot about it. It's not because we love our children more than anybody else. And it's certainly not because we talk about things more than anybody else. It's because NSPCC was fortunate enough to accidentally employ a level 5 leader as their first appeals director in 1974. So I am now benefiting from this global change in attitudes towards child's cruelty because Giles Pegram did more than 30 years at NSPCC as a level 5 leader and took them from £1 million to 200 million. That, to me, is the inspirational story, not of fundraising this quarter or of the centenary appeal or the full stop appeal, but that's a career. And if you can reach the end of your career and done something useful and have something to pass on, then everything else on the way is worth it.
Okay, if we talk about me, let's talk more about me.
Absolutely.
You talk about connection with the core.
Good point, Andrew. Very good point first. Carry on, Giles.
You talk about connection with the cause. I've just taken on a new client in Dublin, the St John of God Foundation, and its fundraising is run by an old friend, Sam Butler, who many people you know. He was involved in the Commission on Donor Experience, and he had me over to Dublin for 3 days last week. And the first of my 3 days, as a paid consultant by the day, the first of my days, he took me the whole day on project visit. And we went from project visit to project visit. And I would talk to the project leader and each time I'd have a hug with the project leader. They were all women, middle-aged women, and I just felt I was so inspired as a consultant. I would work for them for nothing now. I'd pay them to be able to work for them because I'm so inspired by their cause. And I just wonder, I've never had, as a consultant, been employed to go and do project visits. And I wonder how many of these fundraising directors who stay for 2 years, I wonder if they've ever visited a project, let alone met them. And that everyone needs to be connected with the cause. The fundraiser, even the fundraising consultant, and that struck me as. I'm sorry, that was me talking about me again. Finally.
No, example is always absolutely visit projects. We practically insist on it with clients, and I'll tell you stories about things we've seen forever and ever and ever.
And the reason you visit projects is to become connected with the cause and the purpose again.
I can't work for something unless I care about it.
Yeah, but you've also got to get the insight as well from it.
Yeah.
You know, you visit projects and you're looking for the stories that are going to engage, and it's impossible to do that without going and speaking to people.
Have we run out of? You said we've done the deep dive.
I think we'll be running out of studio time.
Okay. Well, and maybe I'm sure you're desperate for more, but that's all you're going to get. But Alan, thank you so much for coming in and doing that with us. Thank you.
Well, there's another section here because it's an interesting observation, and you choose whether you want this for the podcast or not. This 2 businesses, 1 mission requires, different behaviour. The level 5 leadership and the transformational leadership. So it's an observation of mine that there's no country yet has become a successful fundraising country without a successful private sector supply of technology, consultants and agencies. Yeah? None. And because I'm able to look at multiple countries, what we can now clearly see is you have a small number of moderately successful fundraising organisations that create enough of a market for the technology companies, the agencies and the consultancies to become interested, and then they actually create the confidence to grow the sector. Yeah. Now it's not very politically correct to say that, but I'm a researcher. I can only state the facts that we see, and we can see that quite clearly. But the private sector supply for fundraising is absolutely essential, because they bring that commercial sharpness that is different to the services department, which needs a public sector culture because its job is to be safe and to not hurt people. So never underestimate the job of the consultant or the agency. It looks like they're absolutely fundamental to fundraising success anywhere.
They should be treated as joined at the hip. I've always felt.
It's just employment with a different business model, isn't it?
It is.
I had a client came up to me, an ex-client came up to me at the CIOF conference after he presented, and it was one where we'd sort of like been disengaged by him at some point in the past, and he came back 10 years on and he said, I want to apologise for that. He said, I now realise, because of how important you were to the organisation, I should have treated you as a major donor.
Yeah.
Because of the amount that you were raising for us.
Yeah.
But, there was an issue, ego got in the way, and we went out the window, and it took him another 10 years. And he was a lovely man, and, we did great work with them. And it's lovely to hear that. But, again, he'd reached that point of level 5 leadership in a way where he could, he could discuss that again.
Yeah.
Alan, I'm very much looking forward to being at the back of the room at your
Wonderful.
workshop this evening. You've got 60 CEOs in the room. All I can say to you is break a leg.
Thank you very much, Charles.
One last thing before we let everyone go. I haven't got a book with me, but just there on the screen, I don't know if Giles is going to pull one out, but we can pull one. Don't forget, everything, there we go. Everything that we've got, everything we've been chatting about, please do get hold of a copy of Great Fundraising Organisations. If you can't afford them, just get your CEO to email us, and we will make sure that Alan sends you a free copy of Great Fundraising Organisations. And there's little more valuable reading matter out there in the market at the moment that your CEO should be reading. So I think that's it.
Yep.
Thanks, Mark.
Goodbye.
Thank
Thank you, and happy fundraising.